You know when you go to the grocery store or fill up your gas tank and wonder, why does everything cost more than it did last month? That feeling isn't just in your head, it's inflation. But here's the thing, the inflation rate you see on the news or in reports is actually a national average, and it might not exactly match what you experience in your own budget. Your personal inflation rate, which is the real change in the prices of things that you buy, can be quite different. And that difference matters a lot when you're planning your budget or managing your money. Today I'm going to talk you through how to get a set personalized inflation rate for your budget, not some generic number, but one that actually reflects what's happening in your wallet. And the reason is because that personalized number will help you make smarter financial decisions and also avoid nasty surprises. In that way, you end up feeling in control of your money, especially in times like now, when prices seem to be creeping up everywhere. So you might be wondering, what is inflation? Inflation generally refers to the overall rise in prices across the economy, and it's measured by things like the Consumer Price Index, or CPI. But that CPI is based on an average basket of goods and services for a typical household, not your household. Everyone spends differently. Maybe you love to go out to eat, but you don't drive as much. Or maybe you have a mortgage, while a friend rents their place. These differences affect how inflation hits your budget. A personalized inflation rate looks at your unique spending habits, the specific categories you spend money on, and how much. And it measures how the prices of those categories are changing for you. For instance, if housing costs make up a big part of your budget, and housing prices are rising faster than food prices, your personal inflation rate will be higher than the average CPI. I managed to figure this out whilst tracking my own expenses. So officially inflation was reported at around 3 or 4%, but when I broke down my budget, I saw my bills and energy costs had jumped at a much higher percentage than 3%. That gap made me rethink my spending and budgeting choices. So how exactly do you calculate your personal inflation rate? It doesn't really have to be complicated. You basically need to do two things. Figure out how much you spend in each category, and then see how those prices have changed over time. If I was to break it down into a few steps, here's how it would go. So first, you gather your spending data. Look at your receipts, bank statements, or budgeting apps for the past couple of months and categorize your spending. So things like housing, food, transportation, utilities, entertainment, and so on. Then after that, you choose a base period. So pick a time you want to compare against. Usually, it's useful to look at the same month a year ago to avoid any sort of seasonal quirks. For example, compare March 2025 to March 2024. Then what you do is you find the price changes. So for each category, note down how much you spent this month versus that same month last year. But you have to be careful to exclude one-time or unusual purchases, like a new laptop or a holiday, because that could essentially skew your numbers. After that, you calculate your category inflation. So for each category, divide the recent amount spent by the past amount to get the percentage change. You weight the categories by your spending. So because each category contributes differently to your budget, multiply each category's inflation by the proportion of your total spending that category represents. And then finally, you add it all up. So you sum those weighted inflation rates to get your overall personal inflation rate. If all that sounds like a bit too much maths, there's also tools online. There's one from the Office for the National Statistics that kind of walks you through entering your spending details and calculating all of this for you. So this process isn't just an academic exercise. Knowing exactly where your money is going up in price helps you see what parts of your budget needs attention or adjustment. Once you know your inflation rate though, you can use it to make your budget more realistic and flexible. For example, you can adjust your budget numbers. So inflate your past spending figures by your personal inflation rate to estimate how much you'll need going forward, instead of using generic national inflation numbers. You could also identify pressure points. Which categories are driving up your inflation? For me, energy bills and groceries always seem to jump higher, so I keep a close eye on those and look for ways to save. Inflation also can erode the value of your savings if returns don't keep up. I had to rethink my emergency fund to make sure I accounted for higher living costs, so it truly gives me a safety net when needed. And then also, based on your inflation findings, you might decide to cut back on particularly inflated categories or find cheaper alternatives. For instance, you can switch brands, you can cook more meals at home. I do think it is useful to spend the time calculating your personalized inflation rate because it can help you to improve your budget ultimately. And here's something interesting that I found out. Your personal inflation experience can sometimes be negative, meaning some people actually see their personal inflation rate drop. That's because of the substitution effect. When prices rise for certain goods or services, people change what they buy and end up switching to cheaper brands or alternatives. For example, if meat prices go up sharply, you might buy more chicken or plant-based proteins instead. This switch basically lowers the inflation rate on your personal basket. And interestingly, this means inflation is partly a psychological and behavioral phenomenon. It's not just economic. People's spending adaptations help moderate the impact, but it also means you have more control than you might think. That's because you're deliberately choosing alternatives and basically influencing your own inflation rate. Overall then, the bottom line is this: inflation affects everyone differently. Your budget reflects your life, your choices, and your costs. By calculating and using a personalized inflation rate, you can take charge of your finances instead of feeling overwhelmed by broad statistics. So here's a little challenge for you. Take some time this week to track your spending and try calculating your own personal inflation rate. If you don't want to do the maths, use an online calculator. Then think about what it tells you about your budget and where you might make changes. Let me know how it goes in the comments. Managing money in today's inflation environment is tough, but I truly believe a personal approach like this can make a big difference. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.